Hey guys, glad you could join me. I'm Richard Holder and welcome to the channel. Today we're taking a look at nitrous cams. You know, what happens if we run nitrous like on a regular cam, one that nobody cares about. Then we run nitrous on a nitrous cam. We're going to make so much more power, right? Hey guys, if you're new, welcome to the channel. But what happens if you have a question? Hey, I saw this video, but I wanted to ask Richard a question. Well, you're in luck. You get to do that. Join us nightly, 7 o'clock Pacific Standard Time on the live feed. You can come on, join the group. If I don't have an answer to your question, chances are there are lots of bright guys. They might have an answer. So if you've got a question about any of the video that you just saw, or maybe you're working on a project, join us live, 7 o'clock Pacific Standard Time on this channel. To get things started on our small block Chevy nitrous test, where we're testing a nitrous cam versus a more conventional non-nitrous cam, we have our 350 small block. It's actually a 355 small block. It had been bored 30 over. This was the original Gladiator motor owned by Westech Performance. So it had forged rods, forged pistons with valve reliefs to allow us to run all kinds of big camshafts in it. In this particular test on this configuration, we had Airflow Research 180 heads on it. The airflow stuff always works very well. This was a 180 street head, flowing more than enough for us to do what we needed to do in this kind of power level. We had a good induction system on it. We had an Edelbrock RPM air gap, kind of our go-to dual plane, and a good combination with those Airflow Research heads, and a 750 Mighty Demon carburetor. We had 1 3/4 long tube headers. We had an MSD distributor. Obviously, we optimized the timing and jetting to make the power work. And we started off with a fairly small camshaft. This was an Extreme Energy 250 hydraulic flat tappet camshaft, and both of these would be hydraulic flat tappets. The XE250H offered a 432, 444 lift split, so fairly low lift, a 206, 212 degree duration split, and 110 degree lobe separation angle. We just ran this kind of as a standard. This is more like what you'd call maybe an RV style camshaft for a small block Chevy. So run in this manner, our very small cammed 350 produced 342 horsepower and 400 foot-pounds of torque. And since this isn't a nitrous cam, is nitrous going to work on it? Yes, it is. Here's what happens when we ran nitrous on it. We ran a Zex carbureted plate kit, a perimeter plate. We also took out 4 degrees of timing, and the peak power jumped up to 429. 429 horsepower. Peak torque was up to 537 foot-pounds. So good power. This is kind of what we'd expect given the jetting. We'll go ahead and take a look real quick at our jetting. According to the Zex information, we had 100 horsepower jetting in it, and we gained a little over 100 horsepower at some points. And the power gains actually started to drop off slightly because this thing was getting richer and richer as it went out in the RPM range. Now, we could have tailored that more by adjusting the fuel pressure supply to the nitrous or changing the fuel jet, but this is what we ran. So now let's find out what happened when we ran this same combination with a nitrous cam. Now that we've taken a look at running nitrous on your run-of-the-mill kind of RV style cam for the small block Chevy, let's see what happens when we upgraded to our nitrous cam. And this was an NX262 from Comp Cams. Before we take a look and see how it did on nitrous, let's just see how they compare NA. So here is these are both the NA power curves offered by our 250 Extreme Energy cam and our NX262, which was a 462, 480 lift. So more lift than the smaller camshaft. More duration, 218, 230 at 50 for the nitrous cam. And you can see it had a bigger split. It had about a 12 degree split, where our normal like kind of truck cam or RV style cam only had a 6 degree split intake to exhaust. And the nitrous cam also had a wider LSA. It had a 113 degree lobe separation angle, but I wanted to show you what it did NA before we talk about what's going on with the nitrous. The bigger camshaft was a little bit softer down low, below 3,100 RPM, but made quite a bit more power. It pushed power up to 399 horsepower, and torque was up to 407 foot-pounds, and was better from about 4,300 all the way out to 6,000 RPM. So now that we've taken a look and shown you what the camshaft does NA, let's find out what happens when we add nitrous to it. So here's what happened when we added nitrous. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of our 250 cam. We're going to kind of just concentrate on the power differences here. Adding the nitrous pushed peak power up. We were right at about 400, and now we were at 399. Now we're at 499. So it added right at 100 horsepower, our 100 horsepower jetting. Peak torque was up to 567.6 foot-pounds on the, initial initiation there on the just hitting the shot. We always get kind of a spike there. We carry that for almost 2,000 RPM on the nitrous hit. It worked out pretty well. And as we'll see, I want to show you really quickly what happens when, or why we see a little bit of difference. With this nitrous cam, I'll be honest, it made a little bit more of a power gain than it did with a non-nitrous cam. Does that mean nitrous doesn't add the same amount of power regardless of what kind of camshaft it is? Well, yes and no. You guys get to decide for yourself. Let's take a look and see what happened to the air-fuel curve on both of these, and we can kind of figure out why this thing did a little bit better on this combination than it did on the smaller 250 cam. Now that we've demonstrated when you add a 100 shot of nitrous to your carbureted combination, could be a fuel injection combination, doesn't really matter. When you add 100 horsepower worth of nitrous to a combination, it will add about 100 horsepower. So maybe a little bit of a difference, maybe a little bit of a gain from using the nitrous cam, but can we really attribute that to being a nitrous cam? Here you guys get to judge for yourself. But let's take a look at what's happening to our air fuel curve when we're running this motor at wide open throttle before and after we activate the nitrous. So we have our motor starting at 2,500. We're at wide open throttle. We're a little over 13 to 1, which in my opinion is a little bit lean. But the problem is, all during the run, even NA, this thing is trending toward rich. So we kind of had to start there, because if we would have added a bunch of jetting or taken away a bunch of jetting, we would have had, if we would have taken away jetting, it'd have been too lean at the top. If we would have added a bunch of jetting, then it would have been too rich down at the bottom. So this is one of the games that you have to play with on jetting the carburetor and trying to get the air fuel right at different RPM ranges. But here's what happened when we ran the nitrous. You can see we're starting out a little over 13 to 1. It transitions down to about 12.5, which is still perfectly fine. But when we activate the nitrous on or near 4,000 RPM, you can see the extra fuel flow from the nitrous setup, and relative to the amount of power that we're adding, we're going richer and richer and richer. So it drops all the way down below 11 to 1, got as low, well, right below 11 to 1. We'll call that right at 11. And actually, we wouldn't normally run, and on the street system, I wouldn't normally run the nitrous this rich. It'd be a lot, it could be safer even at a leaner mixture than this. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Here's what happens when we ran the same amount of nitrous and the same jetting. We ran it with the other camshaft. Well, the other camshaft had already changed the air fuel mixture. So the other camshaft is the leaner version. So it's up around 13.6 on the load in, which is pretty spicy. And it's down around 12.8, which it stabilizes out and does fairly well there. But around 12.8 is pretty good. But there's very little that we can do short of putting a spacer under this thing, which we kind of did with the nitrous anyway. But you can see the same thing happened. As soon as we hit the nitrous, it went leaner, but it's closer to 11.5 to 1 rather than 11 to 1, especially out where it's making power from 5,000 to 6,000 RPM, let's say. So with the other camshaft, the mixture changed, and it changed both naturally aspirated and it changed with the nitrous. So I'm tending to think, and you guys can let me know what you think in the comments, that any difference of gain, and we're only talking about a couple of horsepower here either way, that we could probably attribute that to the change in air fuel and not to specifically the change in camshaft. Because all of the testing that I've done, I find the same thing. The camshaft that you start with, NA, is just a starting point. So if you start off with an NA combination making 400 horsepower and you add 100 shot, you're going to get 500. Forget about what the cam specs are. If you're making 400, you'll make 500. If your camshaft is such that you're making 450, now you're going to make 550. And that's kind of how it works. But this was an interesting test on our small block. This is why we look at all of the data and not just the dyno results. Let's get to our conclusion. Okay, guys, what's the takeaway on this test running a nitrous cam on our small block Chevy and running the other cam, the little RV style cam, also with nitrous? Well, here's the takeaway. Here's what you should think about. how much power can I make with nitrous with a nitrous cam? You shouldn't be thinking about it like that. What you should be thinking about is how much power can I make NA, and then how much power can I add with nitrous? Because short of a Street Outlaws or Pro Mod 3, 4, 5 stage kitted deal, we're talking about regular motors. You go to the wrecking yard, you get a 4853 or 60 or Big Block Chevy or whatever it is, put it in your car, add a camshaft, add springs, get it to make more power, and then add nitrous. But if you have a 400 horsepower combination and you add a 100 shot, you're going to make 500 horsepower. If you add a 200 shot, you can make 600 horsepower. Here comes the problem. The less power you make NA, the less nitrous you can add because the motor's not going to process that. So the more powerful the NA combination is, not only will you end up at a higher power level at any given nitrous amount. So if you add 200 horsepower to a 300 horsepower motor, you're going to get 500. But if you add 200 horsepower to a 400 horsepower combination, you're going to get 600, and so on and so on. Plus, the higher the naturally aspirated combination is, the more nitrous it will process, so you can add even more nitrous to it. So remember, when you're thinking about making big nitrous power, don't think about the camshaft. Think about what is my NA power, and then how much nitrous can I add? I'm Richard Holder. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff. I'll keep testing.